Great. Hi. This is Henne, Artistic Director of Theater Dybbuk. And it's great to be back with you. You know, we have these conversations a few times a month here on our Facebook page. And we've been in conversation with a lot of our collaborators, organizational partners, people who work with the company. And so this week, I'm really thrilled to have performer and teaching artist Nick Greene here with us. So, Nick, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Aaron. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could take the time. And I just want to frame for a moment, you know, how what we're going to be talking about today, because I think it's really unique and slightly different from some of our previous talks. So,
Cool.
in previous talks, we've really often focused on artistic process and focused on sort of organizational work and those kinds of things, which we'll still talk about that certainly as well.
Yeah.
But also, Nick had a really unique experience over the last few months that we're going to dive into a little bit and talk about how it intersects with his work as a performer and educator as well. And he actually did the full Appalachian Trail, and we were just discussing, is it Appalachian or Appalachian? So I'm going to use both, so no matter where you live, you will be pleased with me. And he did the full trail over about 4.5 months, and we're going to be talking about that. And that was partially, he documented it, and we'll be making a piece of art connected to that. And so we'll be discussing all of that. And just to frame, so Nick has been working with Theater Dybbuk for the last 5-6 years, really. He's been in numerous shows with us. He was in Assemble and Lost Tribes and Exagog, and is a teaching artist with the company who uses our theatrical and storytelling techniques in a variety of settings, and is just a good friend and colleague and all around good person. So really knows our work, and also is doing some really interesting things in the world with us and with others. So the first thing, and again,
Awesome intro, by the way, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah.
Almost like you rehearsed it.
Almost like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So once again, for those who were maybe joining late, Henne, Artistic Director of Theater Dybbuk. I'm here with Nick Greene, and we're going to be talking about artistic process, his work with Theater Dybbuk, as well as his journey on the Appalachian Trail. And so, Nick, first, I always like to start with, tell us a little bit of your history, how you got to who you are and what you do.
Oh man, yeah. Okay, I'll try to give you the brief version. I grew up in South Florida, in Hollywood, Florida, which when I tell the Jewish community, say everyone's like, oh yeah, Hollywood. My grandma lives there. But when I tell somebody on the Appalachian Trail that I'm from Hollywood, Florida, it blows their mind. Like, what? I can't believe you're. Anyway, so I'm from Hollywood, Florida. I went to the University of Florida and studied theater performance and international studies. Actually, I lived in Israel for a time and went to Tel Aviv University there. And kind of just by going to the University of Tel Aviv University of Florida just gave me an international studies degree. Oh yeah, that sounds international. Go ahead. They were fantastic. So anyway, so I got that. And then the dream was always to move to Los Angeles and pursue art, entertainment. And that happened in 2012. So I've been here for 9 years now. And I love it. I mean, I'm super into the outdoors and just living I don't know, an experiential lifestyle. And I think California is kind of the perfect place to do that. You go surfing in the morning and, snowboarding in the afternoon and sleep under the stars in the desert at night. And that's kind of my personality right there. So yeah, I made the move out here, and yeah, I've been working with Theater Dybbuk 5-6 years. You said maybe even longer, 7 years, something like that. And I remember I was at Valley Beth Shalom working there with the Performing Arts Academy, and you came to do a program, and I was like, this is fantastic. I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at here, but whatever it is, I want to be a part of it. So yeah, we went out for a beer afterward, and then the rest is history. Yeah, we really made it happen. And so I'm really appreciative to you for taking me in the way you did, because I mean, I love it. I absolutely love being part of the program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, along those lines, I want to share a little bit about kind of the work you do with us, and want to hear your perspective on it. So you've been in numerous shows with us and helped develop those shows. And you've also done a lot of work in our community areas, where we go into communities and do storytelling workshops and performances of those stories. And you've also done a lot of work in our educational sphere, working with students using storytelling techniques
Right.
for all kinds of learning. And I'm curious about, and this is partially just my own curiosity too, like I'm curious about the parts that most resonate with you, that you've really found inspiring and interesting, and maybe the parts that had challenge or that have particular sort of opportunity in them that you want to talk about.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I wish I knew more about the different parts of the brain so I can talk more adequately about this, but like I feel like theater dybbuk just like hits on every little part of your brain. I mean, the intellectual part, the emotional, it really is so stimulating in so many different ways to be a member. I would say I absolutely love the One Community, Many Voices experience that we do, where we go into a community and we have the community, write their individual stories and give it to us as performers, and then we in turn give it back to them in a performance. And it's just so immediate. I think that's what I love about it. I mean, it's an hour and a half long, say, and in that hour and a half, you experience something that, you know, otherwise would take a lifetime to get out of somebody. You know what I mean? The deepest sort of emotions that they give us, I think it's beautiful, and they allow us to give it right back to them. And you know, it's not uncommon to have those experiences end when people are crying and embracing one another and that sort of thing. So I really identify with that from an immediate standpoint and from an emotional standpoint. I can say I really identify with our large scale productions and just an art standpoint. I mean, from that viewpoint, it's so difficult to be an actor in one of those shows. It's so freaking difficult, which is a good thing. Like, it's hard, it's challenging. You know what I mean? So many times, especially in entertainment, you show up to a project and it's just like fluff, you know what I mean? It's not, there's no depth to it. And no one has ever said Aaron Henne has no depth. You know what I mean? Like, it's so challenging, and I really appreciate that. And something you always speak to is that it's challenging for the audience as well. It's not a simple thing to just sit back and relax and enjoy Exegog. You know what I mean? You really have to lean forward. You really have to put your mind to it and put your heart to it. And I appreciate that too. So not only are we challenging ourselves, we're challenging the audience as well. Yeah. Which, as you said, can be an obstacle. Like, it's not always fun. You know what I mean? It's hard. It's going uphill. You know what I mean? Which is rewarding and not always fun, but ultimately always positive in my experience.
Thanks. And I think you're right. You know, you were talking about the difficulty, and it's difficult for me as a writer director too, that, you know, the pieces require everything, the amount of focus needed on both the performer's part, the audience's part, and then on my part as the director, and on everyone else's part as designers, choreographer, composer, etc., is so high that if your focus wanders for a minute, we lose it. It's hard, and that rehearsal room is, I think we actually keep our spirits remarkably up considering how hard it is. Yeah. And so,
absolutely. Sometimes, like, you know, we're in the middle of a performance and I think to myself, how the hell are they letting us do this? You know what I mean? Who gave us permission to do the things we're doing right now? I mean, it's like elevated. It's really up there. You know what I mean? And it takes a lot from people.
Yeah.
And then, you know, after the show, I get it, because people come up to us and they tell us what they felt. They don't always tell us what they think, because they don't even know what they think at that point, but they feel something. And I think that it makes it all worth it. So I love being a part of a community that allows work like that to happen, you know, and it's not everywhere. It's really not. So I'm really fortunate that we're part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to now talk about what I said at the top, because you just had this pretty remarkable experience of 4.5 months on the trail, and you know, did the whole thing. And so just before we get into, you know, what it meant artistically for you and all those things, just tell us about it a little bit, kind of the experience, maybe how you made the decision to do it, you know, all of those kinds of bits.
All right. You're going to have to stop me at some point. I'll go for days, months talking about it. My family has this home in North Carolina, in Western North Carolina, a little tiny town called Bakersville. And we would go there every year and spend our winters there, go skiing, hang out, that kind of thing. We would also go hiking. It's about 15 minutes away from this trail, the Appalachian Trail, right? And I remember being a 10-year-old boy. We actually have footage of this. It's really cool. And going on the trail, like for the first time that I remember being on this trail and seeing these guys out there with these big beards, and they smelled god awful, and they had these giant packs. And I guess like similar to theater dybbuk, like the first time I saw, I was like, I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, I want it to. I need to be a part of that experience. And I made a vow to myself right there when I was 10 years old that one day I would through hike the Appalachian Trail. And it had like come in and out of my life going forward. And I almost did it after I graduated college, and then it just didn't work out for several reasons. So about 2 years ago, I said, you know what? In 2020, if something isn't like physically holding me back, I'm going to go through hike the trail. I'm just going to do it. And 2020 came. It was like January, and I thought, all right, I'm going. This is happening. I got my flight. I got everything. And then obviously everything sort of derailed at that point. About March is when the trail started closing down in a big way. Now, you can't actually close the trail. It's just the trail. It's public land, right? And a lot of it. Some of it is state park and that kind of stuff, but it's really just land. What was happening is that all these small towns along the way were just totally depleted. And that's where you get your food and resupply and that sort of stuff. So people that were on trail already couldn't get food. You know what I mean? A common misconception is like, oh, do you like hunt out there? No, you don't. Nobody hunts out there. You do forage a little bit. Like there's, berries, and there's so many raspberries and wine berries and things like that. So you can get that stuff, but you still have to go into town to resupply your food. And all of those towns were closed. And there's small little towns with usually elderly populations. And like, if you're bringing the virus there to that town, that's not a good thing, obviously. So people got off trail. I never even started. And I thought, well, there goes that. I can't believe it's not going to happen. So then May rolls around. Early May rolls around. And I live on Venice Beach, and I'm looking around, and there's like hundreds, thousands of people on Venice Beach in May. And I'm thinking to myself, how the hell is this better than that? And people had started getting back on trail, and it's in a secluded sort of way, and going into town and being respectful and safe. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go live in the woods. You know what I mean? What better time to do it than right now? And I left and I went, and like from the very first step, I had a smile on my face until the very last. It was really just one of the most unbelievable experiences I've ever had. An absolute dream come true. As cliche as that is, there's no other way to describe it. I mean, it was never hard. It was challenging the entire way, but because I was where I wanted to be, it was never hard. I never wanted to be anywhere else. And yeah, I mean, you wake up every morning and you hike 15 to 20 miles and sometimes more. And then the next day you do the same thing. And then the following day you do the same thing, and you're battling the rain and the hail sometimes as people start early enough or late enough, the snow. It's really challenging in a big way, but you meet such wonderful people. The community is so magnanimous and just gregarious. Everybody's there for the same reason. And you're going to sleep and waking up with the birds. You really are part of that world. I saw like 15 bears. I stepped on almost 20 rattlesnakes. You know what I mean? Like, you're really immersed in the actual world that we're so removed from. I mean, when's the last bear you saw? When's the last rattlesnake you saw? You know what I mean? When's the last chipmunk that stole your food? You know what? Like, it's like that world we're so removed from, but it's not. We're a part of that still, whether we choose to accept it or not. It was great to accept it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you mentioned the community,
Yeah.
and the people you met, and I'm sure both literally on the trail as well as maybe in some towns.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. Like,
The people,
the
yeah.
stories you heard, the experiences, especially as an artist, thinking about what struck you, what narratives did you take in that surprised you or moved you? I mean, any of those things.
Love it. Yeah, great questions. I mean, I knew from before I went that I wanted to document this experience. So I brought my camera with me and really tried to encapsulate what I was feeling, what I was experiencing through the camera. So a lot of people, I would even say most people out there, say their favorite part, or the part that's most invigorating to them are the other people. They truly make the experience. there's so many places in the world you can go and just be by yourself. And that's not really the point out there. The point out there is to find this other community in a big way. So here's a good point. Okay. If you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off, you beep at them and they beep at you and you have like a fisticuffs match back and forth. If someone on trail cuts you off, you don't beep at them. You say hello and they say hello back and they apologize and you talk and you share a meal. You know what I mean? There's this like interpersonal relationship that you have with people out there that you just don't get in the daily, societal sort of way. If anybody is hungry, you give them food, even if you barely have any of it. If anybody is hurt, you help them. If anybody needs water, you help them. You know what I mean? Like there's such a caring community out there. And you also learn, because you are by yourself for several days on end, especially, I mean, I was anyway, because there wasn't that many people on there this year, as opposed to other years, just because of everything going on, that when I finally do meet somebody after a few days, you crave it. You realize that we as human beings are social creatures. We need one another, so you find that commonality. I'll also say this one last thing about the community. Walking from south in Georgia, where the trail starts and it ends in Maine, you find that our society is so different from one another. Everybody who lives in it, right? We are different. People in the south, people in the north, west, and east. We are just different. Now, that's a good thing, and it's also a challenging thing as well, right? We don't always agree with one another, and it's so apparent. But there was never an instance where we didn't at least agree on one thing, and that was the trail. No matter what, we all had that one thing in common, which makes us also realize that, like, yes, we are different on the surface, but we all need water. We all need food. We all don't like the bears stealing our food. We all, if we fall and break our ankle, it's going to hurt and we're going to need to rehabilitate. You know what I mean? We do all have those commonalities as well. So just like seeing how our country works from south to north was fascinating. Absolutely like a sociological experiment. Really wonderful.
Did you find that in these different places there were not just differences in sort of, the way in which we speak about things and such, but really differences in pace, differences in expectations, differences in kind of structures and systems? Is that what you're talking about? That like everywhere you went, it felt like, wow, I'm having a brand new experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And like there were clumps, you know what I mean? It's really like once I passed the Mason-Dixon line, like from Maryland to Pennsylvania, everything just sort of shifted. It was really wild. Like you go into one grocery store in Maryland, and then another grocery store a day later in Pennsylvania, and it's like a totally different world. It's unbelievable. But then you get up toward like Maine, and then you get kind of into the backwoods of Maine, and it's almost like you're back in the South again. It's a really interesting experience. And like, there's a dichotomy there as well. And I do want to talk about this. I think it's important. There's a dichotomy there within itself. And here's what I mean by that. The people in the South, when I was going into town, I put my thumb up and hitch on into town to get food, and they would immediately pull over. Immediately. And either I'd hop in the bed of their truck or sometimes, just sit right there next to them. And they would talk to me and they would find out about my trip. And they were so gracious and nice. One guy even threw me $20. He was like, that's good. Go get yourself a beer or something. You know what I mean? Like, you're working hard. That's great. They would also tell me about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and how because I'm Jewish, I'm going to hell, and how the homosexuals in this country are really ruining it. And like, there's this weird dichotomy, but they would do it all with a smile on their face and pat me on the back and send me on my jolly way. And then I got up north and I would put my thumb out to go into town, and a car would pass and another car would pass and another, and nobody would pick me up. And eventually when somebody did, and I was pissed off, and a couple hours later, like why no one was picking me up and I have to walk 10 miles into town, they would talk to me and I would find out, oh, we have the same philosophical views and the same political views, and we have the same belief in our civil society here in the United States. But why didn't you pick me up? Like, you have a pickup truck. I didn't even have to look at you. I understand COVID and everything right now, and I want to be respectful, of course. But like, you didn't even have to look at me. And this is a trail town. You know what people are doing. They're going in to get food and then coming back. Weird dichotomies. You know what I mean? So like, what I took away from that is I identify with both. You know what I mean? I'm not one or the other, because none of us are either one or the other. We are nuanced and we are a little bit of everything, was a really wild experience.
That's really interesting. And so I'm curious about hearing all that. I'm curious about your documenting of it.
Yeah.
You know, you're making a film. I don't know if it's a narrative piece or a documentary or somewhere in the middle. I want to hear a little about it. So talk to us a little bit about the documenting experience and kind of what you're producing out of it.
Great. So I'll preface this by saying I didn't know exactly what it was going to be when I got on. I just had no clue, like, what was the experience that I was going to capture. All I knew was that every single documentary I've ever seen about the Appalachian Trail, and I've seen, I think, all of them, has been like, you know, sort of selfie style, like, hey, what's up? It's Nick and Aaron, we're about to climb this mountain. And that's cool. Like, I've watched all of them and I dig it. I didn't want to make that because they've already made it. It's there. You know what I mean? I really wanted to bring an artistic sense to this. I really wanted to dive into people's world and make it cinematic. You know, that was the goal anyway. I'll kind of jump to the end. I will tell you, I probably missed 95% of the shots I wanted to get just because I was totally engrossed in the experience, you know, which is great as a hiker. But it was just like, I'd meet somebody and have this fascinating conversation with them. I mean, like, deep stuff. I met this one lady who, in the previous year, it was her boyfriend who got murdered on trail. And this was her first time back on trail. And she was distraught, obviously, but she had to prove to herself that her life was going on and she had to go back. I mean, I'd have those conversations. I couldn't just like pull out a camera and like start filming her. Yeah. And I didn't want to. I wanted to be with her. So anyway, as much as I've missed, I'm now looking back and like sorting, obviously, and editing the whole documentary. And I did capture a lot. And I think I succeeded in a big way in capturing it cinematically and capturing it artistically. I mean, I would film somebody and they would talk about, you know, their childhood and how their grandparents who raised them were the ones who got them interested in the trail, and how they spent an entire life after their childhood so far away from the trail and so far away from who they thought they wanted to be. And now at 67 years old, here they are. You know what I mean? Like, they can barely walk, but they're doing it. I met one guy who got in a severe accident. He got hit by a car a couple of years back. And they're like, dude, you're barely going to survive. You're barely going to walk again. You're never going to go hike this trail. And he's out there, man. He is like limping along this trail. His whole body was reconstructed, but he's proving to himself and to the world that he can do it. You know what I mean? Like, those stories that are fascinating and beautiful. Mm-hmm. You're only ever aware of them when you put yourself out there and actually seek them out, you know? Mm. So it's somewhere in between narrative and documentary. I think you kind of nailed it because there's just an artistic sense to it. But I think similar to a theater dybbuk show, you're going to feel what it's like to be on trail. Mm. You know what I mean? You're going to get the feeling, the essence of it. Because sometimes I'm just there by myself for days. I don't see anybody, you know? And that's a beautiful experience as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting hearing you talk about also this thing of genuinely being present, which meant sometimes having to sacrifice the opportunity to in the moment make the art, to record it. Yeah. And it really gets me thinking about, obviously, the world we're in, about everything being documented and such, and how do we find this balance also as artists of I often, when I taught playwriting a lot, I used to say half your writing happens when you're walking out on the street and don't have a pen and paper on you, and then when you get home and you realize what stuck, that's what needs to be put on the page. And so it sounds like you had a little of that experience where you had these amazing conversations. You may not have captured them all, but they all went into the process of creation, even if we don't see them directly on film.
A lot of that experience. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, now looking back and I'm editing everything, and I have, like, you know, I'm going to have a 10-hour first cut of this. I'm like, okay, I got enough. I didn't need any more footage. But you're absolutely right. I mean, so much of it was just taking it in, just being present. And I didn't want to sacrifice the experience of just being on trail, my 10-year-old boy experience. You know what I mean? It wasn't all about making a film. And I think that's what it's going to help shape the film, is that it wasn't all about the film. Like, I gained other things out there And I think that's apparent. Somehow it works its way into the art itself.
Yeah.
You know, half of it really was just being there.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. So now you're back.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the sort of landing back. Like you've been back a little, you know, more than a month. We were talking about maybe even close to 2. And what's that transition like? And I know you're sort of back doing a lot of the things you did prior within the confines of COVID, which means they're not exactly what you did prior and all of that. But would love to just hear about what's sticking with you, what is still showing up in your life and your art, and what's maybe harder to hold on to.
Yeah. So I got off trail September 29th. And on September 29th is when my girlfriend met me in Maine to hike the final mountain. Mount Katahdin is the northern terminus. And about 2 weeks into the trail, I'm never going to make another big decision again in my life without just walking in the woods first, because it becomes so clear what you need to do. I decided I was going to propose to her. So in Maine, on the final day, at like 6:30 in the morning at the base of Mount Katahdin, I got down on one knee and I asked Sarah to marry me, and she said yes. So that was wonderful. And
Congratulations.
It was really cool. Like our first challenge, like, oh great, we're getting married. Now let's go climb that mountain. You know, like our first literal challenge. But anyway, we did that, and I really did not want to just jump back into society. I knew that was going to be a bad idea for me. So we spent a few days in Maine. We went to Acadia National Park and went camping. So it was like, I got off trail and went camping. Anyway, so we stayed there for a while. Then we went to Philadelphia where her family lives, and we stayed there for a while. And then we drove from Philadelphia to Los Angeles. We did a cross-country trip, and we took several weeks to do that. And it was really like a slow, smooth transition back into the world. I could not imagine getting off trail and like just going right back to your 5 roommated apartment in Brooklyn or something, and just like being there and having to work. I think I'd be miserable. Post-trail depression is a big thing for a lot of people. And I don't have that because I think it was a smooth transition. I don't have that yet, I would say. But there were so many little lessons learned on trail that I kept with me. You know, I would come up with like a quote a day, basically, of just what did I learn today? Something that's apparent to me now that I can bring with me after this. Something like, when you're too focused on that daunting mountain in the distance that you're going to have to climb, you trip over the little rocks that are right in front of you. And that literally happened all the time. You'd be looking up at this massive mountain and you'd stumble and fall over these little twigs that are right in front of you. And it's like, where are we right now? Yes, that mountain is there, but where are you now? You know, I think that's a really important thing that we often forget in the course of our day-to-day life. There was another really interesting lesson that I learned, that there's only one path. And I don't mean it's the path that's ahead of you. I mean, it's the path that you came from. You cannot go back and do it over. You can go back, but that's a new path. You're going, again, you're moving forward just in the opposite direction that you thought you were going to go. But every little decision you make so many throughout the day. You know, where am I going to get water? Where am I going to eat? Where am I going to get food? Am I going to go into town? Should I stay at this shelter, the next shelter? Where am I going? There's so many little decisions that affect your life so heavily. And ultimately, that's just your path. You know what I mean? And the acceptance of that path is a really big deal out there. To not regret the path that you took, just know that you have that information. You can make different decisions moving forward. But that was my path, and that's pretty cool. So to be able to transfer that back into real life, to look back at my life and say, that was my path. And that's a wonderful thing. There are no regrets on it. What have I learned from that path that I can use moving forward? But no matter what, those were the steps that I walked, you know? So all these little things that transfer so easily back into the real world.
Yeah. Now that you're back, and we're in this, obviously now, especially in LA, we're in an increased lockdown again. Right. How are you sort of mindfully keeping those thoughts and those sensibilities alive as best you can, while also living within the constraints we're living in? Are you finding, like, I find a way to get outdoors every day no matter what, I find a way to sort of cultivate that same sense of awareness, or is it a struggle to hold on to?
It's a good question. I'm fortunate that I live right on Venice Beach. So every single day I'm outside on the beach, you know what I mean? And we get to go run out there and we get to just sit there and there's nobody around. There's nobody there. It's a massive beach. So really, really fortunate that that's the circumstance I'm in right now.
Yeah.
And that it helps a lot. And I know staying artistic is a big thing for me. So, I mean, just playing guitar or editing the documentary or drawing or writing or reading, something that's occupying my mind in a progressive way, like a non-stagnant way, something that's moving forward is really important to me. I really think the community that I live in as well is really important. And you know, I live with my girlfriend and another couple as well. So just having that community of people rather than being alone, like, so unfortunately so many people are, is really important as well. I also think that I sort of cheated this pandemic in a big way. I mean, I was gone for 4.5 months on trail and then like another, you know, month and a half off of that. So like 6 months, I didn't have to be confined like so many people had to be. You know, and I don't take that lightly. I was really fortunate to be able to do this now because I just now feel like I'm getting bogged down by the pandemic. You know what I mean? I just now feel like I'm on lockdown. Yeah. So where so many people have been struggling for so long, I fortunately didn't have to, you know, and I don't take that lightly as well. So, you know, whatever I'm feeling, I also am cognizant that so many people are not feeling the way I'm feeling right now, and it's totally warranted, you know?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, totally. And it's just, I think it's just somehow, what does Woody Allen say in Annie Hall? He's like, you know, when a shark doesn't move, it dies, or what did he say? Like right now we have a dead shark. Yeah, whatever. Something about a dead shark analogy where you have to keep moving, otherwise you drown.
Right.
You know what I mean? You just have to keep moving.
Yeah.
You just have to keep going and somehow find a way to stay progressive and proactive.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a nice place to sort of start to bring us to a close. So I have I have one or two last sort of closing out questions.
Love it.
One is just, so you're working on this film. Obviously, people can learn about you a little on our website, but just, is there anywhere that if people want to check out your work or what you've been up to, or view work that has already happened that they could see somewhere? I mean, are there any places people should go?
Yeah, lovely. So I actually just had 3 of my short films picked up for distribution by a distributor, by a production company called Gonella. So really excited about that. I can include that link somewhere where you can like see the films, and hopefully that leads to something really positive as well. It's interesting. I think that like now that we're in this weird time, we can look back and say, well, I'm so glad I worked hard back then, because now we can like capitalize on those moments that we've already accomplished. You know what I mean? So like making those films way back then, now they're able to, like, people can see them and distribute them. And I feel like that's a progressive move as well. Yeah. The film is going to take a while. This documentary about the Appalachian Trail. It's called Pack and Soul. And it's called Pack and Soul. I'll tell you real quick.
Yeah, please.
I met this guy. He was like very Massachusetts, the accent, everything, right? And his name was No Rush. And he said he hikes 3 to 5 miles a day. So he's in literally no rush. Again, he hiked like 20 miles. The dude goes 3 to 5. And he was in his, I don't know, 60s or something like that. And, you know, I asked him, I was like, 3 to 5 miles, you know, are you ever going to finish the trail? And he goes, I hope it never ends. You know, it's that kind of guy. Really, really wonderful. He said something, I think that was the most profound thing I heard on trail. He said, if you can't carry it in your pack or in your soul, you don't need it. And that stuck with me till the very end. If you can't carry it in your pack or in your soul, you don't need it. You know, so what is the pack we're carrying around, and what do we have in our soul? That constant thing where we just keep re-identifying what that means. Anyway, so that's not going to be done. The documentary is not going to be done for quite a while. I'm really putting a lot of effort into it. So I would say probably like a year from now, maybe a little less. I'm writing a bunch of music for it and all that as well. But I'll be really excited to share that also. I had an Instagram for the first time in my life. I know.
Look at that.
The handle is Through Guy, THRUGUY, because a through hike is what I did on the trail. I have like a hair in my mouth. Sorry. Anyway, so you could go there, and on Instagram you can see like all the pictures and some videos from when I was on trail, and it'll be updated with like the documentary information as well. So that there's a few things, and I can send you some more links as well if you wanted to post.
Thanks. Yeah, and please do feel free also in the comments, Nick, feel free to put the comments on the video to put some of these links too. So that's great.
Yeah, will do.
Well, Nick, such a pleasure. And I'll just say for everyone, you know, watching, we'll be sending out information about this soon, but actually one of the shows Nick was in, Exagog, we're doing a partial reading of selections from online later in the month. So keep an eye out for that Nick will be in. Actually, the entire original cast is going to be in the online reading.
Everyone can do it.
Everyone can do it, which is so great, which is amazing because that show was in 2016. So one of the gifts, I would say, of this challenging moment is that, you know, people, some of whom are no longer in the same geography as the main hub of the company, are able to participate. So that's also really nice. So you'll get to see Nick in that, and more details about that will be coming out soon. Be back here in 2 weeks. And Nick, just such a pleasure to speak with you. In 2 weeks, I'll be with Diana Tanaka, who is one of our associate artists, one of our company artists, and who's amazing. And Nick, thanks for taking the time and sharing your experience. And so good to see you, and everyone else, see you in a few weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.